The room was not meant for surprises. It was one of those ordinary places where people walked in with fixed expectations and walked out thinking nothing special had happened. The piano sat quietly near the front, slightly out of place, like a decoration no one paid much attention to anymore. Most people believed it was there just for show, something polished and forgotten. That afternoon moved slowly. Chairs scraped the floor as people settled in. Some talked in low voices, others scrolled on their phones, waiting for the program to move along. The event itself was casual, almost last minute, meant to fill time rather than create memories. No one expected to witness anything worth remembering. She sat among the crowd at first, not near the front, not trying to stand out. Her posture was relaxed, her expression calm. If anyone noticed her at all, they would have thought she was just another guest, someone there to watch, not to perform. There was nothing about her appearance that hinted at anything unusual. No dramatic gestures, no nervous pacing. Just quiet presence. At some point, the organizer glanced around the room and noticed the piano. Someone joked that it would be nice if somebody played something just to break the silence. The comment was casual, almost careless. A few people laughed. Another voice added that even a simple tune would be fine. Nothing fancy, just background sound. The suggestion hung in the air for a moment. People looked around, but no one moved. Playing in front of others, even casually, made most uncomfortable. The piano remained untouched. That was when she slowly stood up. There was no announcement, no dramatic pause. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate either. She simply walked forward, each step steady, as if this was something she had done many times before, even if no one else knew it. A few heads turned. Some people raised their eyebrows, surprised that anyone had volunteered at all. As she reached the piano, someone near the front smiled and said, half joking, "Just play something easy." The words were not unkind, but they carried a clear message. No one was expecting much. No one thought they were about to hear anything special. She nodded lightly, acknowledging the comment. Her face showed no reaction beyond that. She sat down on the bench and adjusted it slightly, just enough to feel comfortable. The sound of the bench moving echoed louder than expected in the quiet room. For a brief moment, she rested her hands in her lap. Her eyes closed, not in a dramatic way, but as if she was taking a breath. Inside her, memories stirred. Not memories she planned to share, but ones that lived deep within her. Tied 2 long hours alone with keys and melodies that never had an audience, music had been part of her life for as long as she could remember, not in a glamorous way. There were no big stages, no bright lights, just a piano in a small space, sometimes worn, sometimes out of tune, but always waiting. She had learned early that music didn't need permission. It only needed patience. There were years when she played every day, losing track of time as her fingers moved across the keys. There were also years when life pulled her away from the piano completely. Responsibilities grew heavier. Dreams were packed away quietly, not thrown out, just placed somewhere safe, or so she thought. Most people in the room had no idea of this history. To them, she was simply a woman sitting at a piano, ready to play a small, forgettable tune. Her fingers finally lifted and hovered over the keys. The room grew quieter, not because people were deeply interested, but because they were polite. A few leaned back in their chairs, expecting something gentle and brief. The first note had not yet been played, but something had already shifted. It was subtle, almost impossible to explain. There was a stillness around her that felt different from ordinary silence. It was not empty. It was full of something waiting to be released. She opened her eyes and looked down at the keys. Each one felt familiar, like an old friend. Her hands rested lightly, with no tension. There was no rush. She knew exactly where to begin. In her mind, she reminded herself why she had stood up in the first place. Not to impress. Not to prove anything. Just to play. Just to let the music speak in a place where words had filled too much space. Someone in the back shifted in their seat, clearly impatient. Another person checked the time on their phone. They thought this would be over quickly. She took one more quiet breath. The room waited, unaware that this simple moment was about to turn into something no one would forget. Before her fingers touched the keys, her mind traveled back through years that no one in that room could see. To the people watching, she was simply sitting there, quiet and still. But inside, there was a long story unfolding, one built slowly over time. She did not grow up surrounded by applause or praise. Music was not something people clapped for in her early life. It was something private, something done when the world was quiet and expectations were low. The piano had always been there for her, even when people were not. It listened without judging. It waited without rushing her. As a child, she used to sit at a piano that was far from perfect. Some keys stuck. Others made strange sounds. But she learned to work around those flaws. She learned that beauty did not come from perfection. It came from persistence. Day after day, she practiced simple tunes at first. Her fingers stumbled. Her timing was off, but she kept going. There were no teachers standing over her shoulder most of the time. No one telling her she was gifted or special. She learned by listening, repeating, and feeling the music in her own way. Sometimes she played late at night, when everyone else was asleep. The soft sound of keys felt safer then, like a secret shared only between her and the piano. As the years passed, the music inside her grew more complex. Simple tunes turned into deeper melodies. She began to understand how emotions could live inside sound, how sadness could move slowly across the keys, how joy could jump and dance, how anger could be sharp, and hope could be gentle. But life does not always leave space for music. There came a time when the piano was pushed aside, not physically but in priority. Responsibilities arrived quietly and stayed loudly. Work, family needs, daily struggles, the kind of things that do not ask if you are ready. The piano became something she walked past instead of something she sat down with. Weeks turned into months. Months into years. Still, even during those silent years, music never fully left her. It stayed somewhere deep inside, waiting patiently. Sometimes she would hear a song on the radio and feel her fingers move slightly, as if remembering. Sometimes she would pass a piano in a public place and feel a pull in her chest. She could not explain. There were moments when she wondered if that part of her life was over, if the music belonged to the past. She told herself that it was fine, that not every dream needed to be lived out loud, that some could remain quietly remembered. But the truth was, the piano had shaped her in ways nothing else had. It taught her discipline when motivation was low. It taught her patience when progress was slow. It taught her how to sit with her feelings instead of running from them. And now sitting in this ordinary room, all of that history rested in her hands. The people watching her had no idea how close she had come to never playing again. They did not know how many times she had sat alone, wishing she could return to the keys but feeling like life had closed that door. They did not know how many small moments had led her back here. Someone in the front row cleared their throat softly, breaking the silence for a second. The sound reminded her where she was. She was not alone now. She was surrounded by strangers who expected almost nothing from her, and that was strangely freeing. No pressure to impress. No expectations to meet. Just a simple request to play something easy. Her hands hovered over the keys again. They felt steady, even though it had been a while since she had played in front of anyone. Muscle memory returned slowly like an old friend waking up. She pressed one key gently, not yet making a sound, just feeling its resistance. She remembered the first time she ever performed for someone else. It had been small, almost forgettable, but to her it had meant everything. She had been terrified then. Her hands had shaken. Her heart had raced. Now, years later, she felt something different. Calm. Not because she no longer cared, but because she understood something she hadn't before. Music did not belong to the audience. It belonged to the moment. Around her, people shifted in their seats. A few exchanged glances. Some leaned forward slightly, curious now, if only because of the quiet focus she carried. Others still seemed distracted, waiting for the sound to begin so it could end. She adjusted her posture, sitting a little straighter. Her feet found the pedals without looking. Everything felt familiar again, like she had never really left. In her mind, she made a quiet choice. She would begin exactly as asked, something simple, something soft. But she also knew she would not stop there. Not today. Not after everything the piano had given her. She thought about the years she had hidden this part of herself. How easy it was to be underestimated when you stayed silent. How often people assumed she was ordinary because she did not announce her abilities. That did not make her angry. It made her reflective. There was a strange beauty in being unseen. It allowed her to grow without pressure, to fail without shame, to learn without judgment. Now, she realized that being unseen had prepared her for this moment more than any spotlight ever could. Her fingers finally pressed down, just slightly testing the weight of the keys. The sound was barely noticeable. A few people might not have even heard it. But to her, it was loud enough. It was the sound of returning. She began to play the simplest version of the tune she had in mind. Slow, clean, familiar. Exactly what was expected. The notes filled the room gently, like background music meant to be ignored, and that was okay, because beneath that simplicity lived years of experience, emotion, and control. She was not rushing. She was letting the music breathe, letting herself settle fully into the moment. The audience listened casually at first. Some nodded absent-mindedly. Others relaxed, reassured that this would be nothing more than a short, pleasant interruption. No one clapped. No one spoke. It was just sound moving through space. But inside her, something was building. With every note, she felt more connected, more present. The piano responded to her touch as if it had been waiting for her all along. The keys no longer felt foreign. They felt like home. She knew what was coming next. She knew when the shift would happen. But she did not rush toward it. She allowed the simple tune to finish its quiet introduction. This part of the music mattered too, because sometimes the most powerful moments begin in the smallest ways. The simple tune continued, calm and familiar, just as everyone expected. The notes flowed gently, nothing loud, nothing dramatic. It sounded like something that could easily fade into the background. A few people relaxed even more, convinced they already understood what kind of performance this would be. But as she played, her hands began to move with a little more confidence. The rhythm stayed steady, yet something underneath it started to change. It was subtle at first, so subtle that most listeners didn't notice right away. Only those paying close attention might have felt it, like a quiet shift in the air. She repeated the melody once more, but this time with a slightly different touch. A softer pause here, a deeper press there. The tune was still simple, still familiar, but it carried more feeling now. It was as if the music was slowly waking up. One person near the middle stopped scrolling on their phone and looked up. Another leaned forward without realizing it. The sound was no longer just filling space. It was asking for attention. Her face remained calm, focused on the keys. She wasn't looking at the audience. She didn't need to. Everything she needed was right there in front of her. Her fingers knew where to go next, guided by instinct and memory. Rather than thought, then came the first real change. She added a note that wasn't part of the original tune. It wasn't wrong. It didn't clash. It simply expanded the sound, like opening a door to another room. The music grew richer, fuller, but still controlled. Still gentle. A few people exchanged quick glances. Someone in the back straightened up. There was a quiet sense of surprise moving through the room now, not loud enough to interrupt, but strong enough to be felt. She continued, slowly weaving in more complexity. The left hand grew more active, adding depth beneath the melody. The right hand danced more freely, no longer confined to the simple pattern it had started with. The tune began to stretch, to breathe. The room grew quieter than before. Not polite, quiet, real quiet. No one was talking now. No chair scraping. No phones lighting up. Even the small background noises seemed to fade away, as if the room itself was listening. She felt it too. The connection between her and the piano deepened with every passing second. The hesitation she might have felt earlier was gone. In its place was a steady confidence, the kind that comes not from ego, but from familiarity. This was where she belonged. She let the music rise gently, adding emotion without rushing it. Each note felt intentional. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was forced. The melody began to tell a story, even though there were no words. Some people felt a tightness in their chest without knowing why. Others felt a warmth spread through them. One person blinked slowly, surprised by the sudden emotion they couldn't explain. This was no longer background music. The tune transformed further, moving into something deeper, something more powerful. The rhythm shifted slightly, giving the piece new energy. Her hands moved faster now, but still with control. Still with purpose. Someone near the front whispered, "Wow," without realizing they had spoken out loud. No one shushed them. The word felt appropriate. She leaned into the piano just a little. Not dramatically, but enough to show she was fully present. The sound grew stronger, filling the room from corner to corner. It wasn't loud, but it was full, complete. The audience was fully engaged now. People who had expected nothing were suddenly sitting on the edge of their seats. They weren't thinking about time anymore. They weren't wondering how long this would last. They were inside the moment, carried by the music. She moved effortlessly between soft and strong, slow and fast. The contrast kept pulling listeners deeper. Just when the music felt calm, she added a rush of notes that lifted the energy. Just when it felt powerful, she brought it back down to something tender. It felt personal, like she was sharing something private without saying a word. Her fingers moved with confidence shaped by years of practice, even if those years were invisible to everyone else. Each transition felt natural, not planned. As if the music was guiding her rather than the other way around. The piano responded beautifully. The keys seemed alive under her touch. Every sound felt clear, intentional, meaningful. At this point, no one remembered that she had been asked to play something simple. That request felt distant, almost laughable now. The room had completely changed. Some people watched her hands closely, amazed by how easily they moved. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. A few felt emotional without understanding why. They weren't thinking about skill or technique. They were feeling something deeper. She reached a moment where the music softened again, almost returning to the original tune. It felt familiar, comforting. But now, it carried everything that had come before it. The simplicity felt richer because of the journey. This part of the piece felt reflective, like a pause to breathe. The room stayed silent, completely still, as if everyone was afraid to break the spell. Even those who had arrived distracted or bored were now fully present, caught in the flow. Then, slowly, she began to build again. The notes climbed higher, faster, stronger. Her hands moved with certainty, confidence, and emotion. This was no accident. This was mastery revealed quietly, without announcement. The energy in the room rose with the music. Hearts beat a little faster. Breath was held a little longer. The performance felt alive. It's unfolding in real time. She was no longer just playing the piano. She was telling a story shaped by years of silence, effort, and patience. A story of returning, of remembering who she was, of allowing herself to be seen, even for just this moment. The audience didn't know the details of that story, but they felt its truth as the music reached another powerful moment. Her hands moved across the keys with speed and precision. The sound was confident, bold, and emotional. This was the part that no one had expected. This was the part that turned curiosity into awe. Some people smiled without realizing it. Others shook their heads slowly, unable to believe what they were hearing. A few felt tears forming, surprised by their own reaction. The room was no longer ordinary. Time seemed to slow down. Each second felt full. Each note mattered. She stayed fully focused, completely present, giving everything to the music without holding back. There was no fear now, no doubt, just connection. And as the piece continued to unfold, it became clear to everyone listening that this was not a casual performance. This was something rare, something unforgettable, something that had been waiting a long time to be heard. The music had reached a place where there was no turning back. What started as a quiet moment had now grown into something powerful, something alive. Her hands moved across the keys with confidence, not rushed, not forced, but fully awake. Every note felt like it belonged exactly where it was. The sound filled the room completely now. It wasn't just coming from the piano anymore. It felt like it was moving through the air, through the walls, through the people sitting there. No one shifted in their seats. No one whispered. It was as if everyone had agreed, without saying a word, to stay perfectly still. She leaned slightly forward, fully connected to the piano. Her fingers pressed deeper, stronger. The music grew bolder, rising and falling like waves. There was strength in it now, but also control. Nothing was messy. Nothing was random. Every change felt intentional. The audience could feel it. This was not luck. This was not a moment of sudden talent. This was skill shaped by time, by patience, by years of quiet work that no one had seen. Her left hand created a strong bass, steady and deep, while her right hand moved freely, painting emotion across the melody. Fast runs flowed into soft pauses. Sharp moments softened into warmth. The balance was beautiful. Some people felt their hearts race. Others felt a calm they hadn't felt in a long time. A few didn't even realize they were holding their breath until they slowly let it go. The piano no longer sounded like a simple instrument. It sounded like a voice. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to escape the room, but to feel the music more deeply. When she opened them again, her focus was sharper than ever. Her hands moved faster now, not wildly, but with precision that came only from experience. The music climbed higher, growing more intense. The sound became richer, fuller, almost overwhelming in the best way. It demanded attention. It demanded emotion. Someone near the back quietly placed a hand over their mouth, stunned. Another person shook their head slowly, unable to understand how this was happening in front of them. Just moments ago, they had expected nothing special. Now they were witnessing something rare. She reached a powerful section where the notes flowed quickly. One after another, like a rush of thoughts finally being released. Her fingers moved with ease, as if the piano was guiding her rather than the other way around. There was no hesitation, no fear of mistakes. This was the part where everything she had held inside for years seemed to come out through the keys. The music spoke of struggle without sounding heavy. It spoke of hope without sounding forced. It carried emotion, but never begged for it. It trusted the listener to feel it on their own. The room felt smaller now, not because it had changed, but because everyone inside it was connected by the same experience. Different lives, different stories, all pulled together by one sound. She softened the music suddenly, bringing it down to a quiet, gentle place. The shift was smooth, almost unexpected. It felt like a deep breath after a long climb. The audience followed her there willingly, leaning into the calm. This quiet part felt personal, intimate. The notes were slower, more thoughtful. Each one lingered just a little longer, as if she wanted to savor it. The sound wrapped around the room like a warm blanket. Some people felt tears forming in their eyes, surprising themselves. They weren't thinking about why. They didn't need to. The music was doing all the work. Her face remained calm, but there was emotion there. Visible in the slight movement of her eyebrows, the gentle way she swayed with the sound. She wasn't performing for attention. She was sharing something real. Then, slowly, she began to build again. The quiet turned into strength. The gentle became bold. The rhythm returned, stronger than before. Her hands moved with speed and confidence, filling the room with energy. The piano responded beautifully, every key clear and alive. The sound rose and fell, creating tension and release. The audience felt it in their chests, like a shared heartbeat. This was the peak. The music surged forward, powerful and fearless. Her fingers flew across the keys, not in a showy way, but with purpose. Each movement made sense. Each note landed exactly where it needed to. The audience was completely lost in it now. Time no longer mattered. The outside world felt far away. There was only this moment, this sound, this shared silence between notes. Someone near the front leaned forward, eyes wide as if afraid to miss even a second. Another person pressed their hands together tightly, feeling overwhelmed in the best way. She held the energy, guiding it carefully, not letting it collapse into chaos. That was the mark of true mastery, knowing not just how to build, but how to control. Then, just when it felt like the music could go no further, she began to slow it down. The notes stretched out again, softer, calmer. The power didn't disappear. It settled, it rested. Like a storm slowly clearing, leaving the air clean and still. The audience followed her into the quiet without resistance. No one wanted to interrupt this feeling. No one wanted it to end too soon. Her hands moved more gently now. The music felt reflective, almost grateful. It carried the weight of everything that had come before, but without heaviness. It felt complete. She returned briefly to the simple tune she had started with, but it sounded different now. Fuller, deeper, changed by the journey. What once felt ordinary now felt meaningful. The circle was closing. The final notes approached slowly. She did not rush them. She allowed each one to speak, to fade naturally. Her fingers lifted carefully, as if letting go of something precious. The last note hung in the air, soft but clear. And then silence. Not the awkward kind. Not the kind filled with movement or noise. This silence was full, heavy with emotion, alive with everything that had just been shared. For a brief moment, no one moved. No one spoke. It felt like the room was holding its breath together, afraid that any sound would break what had just happened. She kept her hands still above the keys for a second longer, then slowly lowered them into her lap. Her shoulders relaxed. She had given everything she needed to give. She did not look at the audience right away. She took a quiet breath, grounding herself back in the room. That was when the silence finally broke. Not with words, but with a feeling that something unforgettable had just taken place. For a few seconds after the last note faded, no one reacted. It wasn't because they didn't know what to do. It was because everyone felt the same thing at the same time. They needed a moment to come back to themselves. The silence was deep and full, not empty at all. It carried everything the music had left behind. Emotions hung in the air, unspoken but shared. Some people felt a tight feeling in their throat. Others felt warmth spreading through their chest. A few blinked slowly, as if waking up from a dream. She stayed seated, hands resting quietly in her lap. Her breathing was steady now. The rush of the performance had passed, leaving behind a calm she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't thinking about the audience. She wasn't waiting for a reaction. She was simply present, letting the moment settle. Then slowly, someone began to clap. It was soft at first, almost unsure. One pair of hands, then another. Within seconds, the sound grew stronger, spreading across the room. Applause filled the space, rising quickly, honestly, without hesitation. People stood up without planning to. Chairs moved back. Faces lit up with amazement and respect. Some clapped above their heads. Others clapped close to their hearts. A few wiped their eyes quietly, hoping no one noticed. The applause wasn't polite. It was real. She finally looked up. For a brief moment, she seemed surprised by the reaction. Not because she didn't understand it, but because she hadn't expected it. Her expression softened. She gave a small, humble smile, the kind that comes from gratitude, not pride. She stood slowly, stepping away from the piano. The applause continued, steady and strong. Some people nodded at her as if trying to say thank you without words. Others simply watched her, still processing what they had just experienced. She gave a slight bow, not formal, not dramatic. Just a simple gesture of respect. Then she turned and began to walk back toward where she had been sitting before. She didn't wait for the applause to stop. That small detail stayed with many people. The way she didn't soak in the attention. The way she didn't look around to see who was watching. It felt as if she had come only to give the music, not to receive praise. As she returned to her seat, the clapping slowly softened. Conversations began again, but they were different now. Quieter, more thoughtful. Who was she? Someone whispered, "I had no idea." Another replied. A few people shook their heads in disbelief, smiling to themselves. Others sat quietly, staring at the piano as if it had transformed into something sacred. She sat down and folded her hands, her posture relaxed. Inside, she felt something close to peace. Not excitement, not relief, just a deep sense of rightness. For the first time in years, she felt fully connected to a part of herself she had kept hidden for too long. As the event continued, people kept glancing in her direction. Not in a curious way, but with respect. Some wanted to say something but didn't know how. Others simply smiled when their eyes met hers. One person eventually leaned over and softly said, "That was beautiful." She nodded gently and replied, "Thank you." Nothing more. No explanation. No story. She didn't feel the need to explain where the music came from. It had already said everything. Later, as the room slowly emptied, small groups talked about what had happened. Some tried to describe the feeling, but words fell short. Others said it reminded them of something they had forgotten. A few admitted they had never expected anything like that from such a simple moment. The piano sat quietly again, just as it had before. But it didn't feel the same anymore. It no longer felt like decoration. It felt like a witness. She stood up to leave, picking up her things. As she walked toward the exit, she passed the piano once more. For a second, she paused. She placed her hand lightly on its smooth surface, not to play, just to acknowledge it. Then she walked out. Outside, the air felt cooler. The noise of the world returned slowly. Cars passed. Voices echoed. Life continued as it always did. But something inside her had shifted. She walked calmly, her steps unhurried. She wasn't replaying the performance in her mind. She wasn't wondering what people thought. She was thinking about how long it had taken her to return to something that's always been part of her. She realized that sharing her music didn't take anything away from her. It gave something back. In the days that followed, some people tried to find her. They asked around, curious about the woman who had turned a simple request into something unforgettable. But she didn't step forward. She didn't post about it. She didn't chase the moment. That was never the point. The true impact of what happened lived quietly in the hearts of those who were there. In the way one person decided to pick up an old instrument again. In the way another remembered a dream they had set aside. In the way someone else simply felt lighter for a while. As for her, she returned to her piano at home. She opened the lid and sat down, just like she used to. The room was quiet. No audience. No applause. Just her and the keys. She placed her hands gently where they belonged and began to play. Not a masterpiece. Not something grand, just music, and this time, she knew she wouldn't wait so long to let it be heard again, because sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected moment to remind you who you really are. And sometimes, a simple tune is never really simple at all.